Many fans prior to the reveal of Min Min believed in their hearts that spirits, these little pictures of characters, deconfirmed any chance of them becoming a fighter in the roster of Smash Ultimate. But now that the opposite has been confirmed, that spirits can indeed become fighters, which other characters, if any, should get that treatment? I had some ideas for personal picks that I'd like to see, but I was kind of more curious as to who you all wanted to see the most. So I asked in the community tab for some of your personal hopes, and also got some ideas from the comment section and my Twitter to compile a list of spirits that many of you would like to see, with the only rule being no assist trophies because I'll likely cover them in another video. And now it's time for me to either destroy those hopes or just generally gush about how much I'd like to see that character in the game. For every suggestion I'm going to give a few ratings, how well the character could work in Smash, moveset wise in my opinion, how much I'd personally like to see the character in the game, and of course, how likely I believe the character is to join the battle in Fighters Pass 2. And if your idea didn't get picked, that's perfectly fine. If enough of you want to see another video like this in the future, I'll need some more ideas, so be sure to list any that you have with some supporting reasons in the comment section down below. And with all that being said, let's get started. The first character that I'm going to be talking about today may be surprising to you because he was the most highly requested character in the community post, this being Bandana Waddle Dee. On the surface, many could instantly write this little guy off. Many critics I've seen liken the Waddle Dees getting into the Goomba from the Mario franchise getting into Smash. That kind of idea. And I'd even go as far as to say that quite a while ago I might have been in the same camp, but that was until the Bandana Waddle Dee had been pushed into a more prominent role for the series. On the surface, there isn't too much significant other than this blue bandana on his head, but the important part of this guy's introduction is that he now provides a definitive version of sorts for the Waddle Dee species, which had been mainly known either as generic NPCs or very weak enemies prior to this. But would he work, should he get in, and most importantly, will he get in? It's time for the ratings. On the moveset potential front, I'd give him a 7 out of 10. There are definitely a lot of possibilities drawing from the various appearances of the Waddle Dee enemies, and some things that Bandana Dee specifically can do. But if they stay safe and don't use all of the options at their disposal, I fear the moveset being a bit generic. In terms of the personal want, I'd also give him a 7 out of 10, with this mainly stemming from the desire for an additional Kirby rep because it's a popular series that's been around for a long time, that hasn't gotten a new rep since Brawl. Although I guess there's an even more popular franchise with that problem as well. My only fear that keeps this rating lower is that they won't take advantage of some of the more unique components to draw from for a moveset like I was just talking about, but I'm still rooting for him a lot. And for the likelihood to be in Fighters Pass 2, I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10 here. Bandana Dee does have a decent chance, and considering that at least from what I've gathered he's pretty popular with fans, it would make some sense to include him as a pretty recognizable DLC fighter. My main concern is that Sakurai has stated his desires in the past to not make him look biased towards the series that he created, which includes Kirby, meaning it may not be as likely of an idea, but since Nintendo is supposedly choosing the newcomers, that might not factor in. I'm sure Sakurai still does have a decent say in the process though. Moving on to another character frequently discussed in the realm of Smash Bros. Fighter speculation, this being Gino from Super Mario RPG. Unlike Bandana Dee, who I understand more of the requests for modernly, it still baffles me a bit to see just how much support Gino gets to become a playable fighter, to the point where he had to be considered for a roster spot in multiple entries in the series. There's gotta be a reason that this admittedly pretty memorable character from Mario RPG, if you've played it, gets requests, right? Well, I'd say so once we get to the ratings. The moveset potential I believe is where a lot of the praise for Gino comes from. He's a magic specialist in Mario RPG, and carrying over some of his famous attacks into a Smash moveset I believe can make him a really interesting character to play as, and definitely unique compared to the Mario characters currently in the roster. This is why I give the moveset potential an 8 out of 10. There could definitely be something great in store here. Moving on to my personal want for the character, and obviously opinions may differ depending on whether or not you've played through Mario RPG, but as someone who has, I understand why many would like to see this character in. Is he at the tippity top of my request list like many others? No, but if you asked me if I wanted to see him, absolutely. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. And finally, for the likelihood department, how likely is it that Gino gets included in Fighters Pass 2? And I'm kinda conflicted here in some ways. On the one hand, he's still an obscure character to many fans, and when you're selling DLC, that might not be the best fit. But then on the other hand, Sakurai continually has to acknowledge requests for him because of how frequently he's suggested, and he does have a fun and unique potential moveset. I'll go with a 6 out of 10 for this one. He still has a pretty good chance to me, but maybe not the most likely character. The next character I'll be discussing today is Viridi, a character who, I'll have to admit, I really didn't expect to be talking about in a video today. The Kid Icarus fanbase is larger than I imagined, at least in my immediate audience, because there were multiple requests for characters from the series ranging from Medusa to Hades to the one who I saw had the most support being Viridi. She's a young goddess from Kid Icarus who is known for despising humans due to their disregard for nature, and with her strong personality she was found to fit perfectly in a role in the Palutena's temple stage where she can express that. But does this bold and brash character have the potential for a fun and unique moveset? Absolutely. For the uninitiated, you may be shocked at just how much can be pulled from this game even outside of just using your standard weapons being the palm and claws. There's also the legions of her soldiers and enemies that can be drawn from here. Fans have also pointed out that she should utilize the cannon weapon type as it's the only main one from the series not currently represented in a Smash moveset. And if all this potential is realized, we could be in for a great and unique moveset. Definitely a 9 out of 10 here. She could be fantastic. In terms of my personal wants, that'll get a little dicey when it comes to the amount of reps that'll bring Kid Icarus to. I know that there's so much more to a character individually outside of the series that they represent, but the fact of the matter is that there's only a certain number of spots left for newcomers, and a 4th Kid Icarus rep being one of them would either rob a more deserving current series or a brand new series from getting a fighter, which is why my rating is slightly reduced to being a 7 out of 10 here. Viridi could definitely be a fun pick, but many would argue 3 characters is already kind of a lot for Kid Icarus, and a 4th seems unnecessary for Ultimate at least. I'd be rooting for him more later down the line. And finally, for the likelihood, and yeah, I'm going with a 2 out of 10 here. Basically, just take any issues with Bandana D and Gino and just combine them together for this one, and then you'll pretty much have an accurate encapsulation of Viridi's Smash situation. It'll overrepresent a franchise even further, and I'm not exactly sure that legions of fans will be trying to go out and buy Viridi, despite there being a potential for a really interesting moveset there. Like I said, I'd be happy to see Viridi, but I highly doubt she makes it into the Fighter's Pass. And moving on to a new rep for the Sonic the Hedgehog series, and the one that I saw the most support for in the community post was Tails. This lovable ally to Sonic is shown to use a variety of abilities in the series, but would this translate over to a great moveset in Smash? Well, I think there's definitely a chance. Tails can use a variety of spinning attacks which are a staple of his in the series, along with some weapons that he uses such as the magic hook from Sonic Battle for example. There is potential to do something interesting with this set, but my only fear is that they drop the ball on him like they did with Sonic's moveset. Now many believe that Sonic's poor moveset mainly derives from his short development window to get into Brawl, but you'd think that if they really found it to be an issue that his kit would have been changed later on, right? However, it hasn't, leading to me giving Tails a 7 out of 10. The potential is definitely there, just not at a high level, and they may drop the ball with it. In terms of personal desire for the character, I did give the idea of a new Sonic representative, any representative really, well maybe not that one, a lot of praise in my video about new characters from every series getting in. This is a popular series historically, and in my opinion is the third-party franchise that should have the most representatives because of just how big the rivalries were with Nintendo and Sega, and now fans have the opportunity to relive that in Smash. And Tails I obviously want, but since that desire isn't entirely specific to him, I'll rate it a 7 out of 10 here. And finally, the likelihood, and again for Tails specifically, I'll rate a 4 out of 10. If my rating was to see a Sonic character in general join the Fighter's Pass, we could be looking at a 5 or maybe even a 6 if you want to stretch it, but since there's so many good options, I'm not entirely sure that Tails would be the choice. He does have a chance though. Let's move on to the next character, this being Paper Mario. He's been receiving quite a bit of spotlight recently because the newest entry in his series, Origami King, is one of the only major things Nintendo seems to have coming out on the Switch right now. But he's always been a character beloved by many for being the star of 2 fantastic RPGs and then the star of a bunch of wildly different games, all varying in quality over the years. He got quite a bit of requests in the community poll and in the comment section of previous videos, but will he have a good enough moveset to justify inserting a 3rd Mario into the roster? I'd say yes. With his main weapons being his hammer and likely a stomp of some kind, things could be made a lot more unique if the abilities of many of his partners over the years were incorporated into his moveset. This would be absolutely amazing to see, and if they were to do that, we could be in for one of the most fascinating movesets in the entire game. And it's because of this big potential that I give Paper Mario a 9 out of 10 in this department. In terms of personal want, this is definitely somebody that I could get behind. While many complain about there being a lot of Mario characters in the roster, this guy, like Gino, represents a different segment of the franchise than the current selection of characters, which likens him to kind of a Wario of sorts if you get what I mean. I'd really like to see him included, definitely an 8 out of 10. And finally for the likelihood, and I really go back and forth on this one, but I'll give him about the same likelihood as Gino with a 6 out of 10. A decent chance to get into Smash because of his frequent game appearances, popularity, and great moveset potential. But he doesn't seem to have the same amount of vocal fan support and history of being considered for a playable role as Gino does, so I can't really justify giving him a higher rating. I'd say they have about the same chance. Moving on to Chibi Robo? Yeah, this one should be interesting. This character is from a pretty obscure series of Nintendo games which started out on the GameCube but then made a transition into the handheld array of Nintendo consoles where it didn't fare too well sales-wise. It got to the point where the series had to completely change its identity to a 2D platformer in the desperate hopes that it would succeed sales-wise to continue the franchise. but that didn't work out so well. But despite all of that, there are still many fans out there who want this little guy in Smash. But would he work? Let's find out. For the moveset, many fans speculate about him using a ziplash attack of sorts by swinging his cord, which would deal big damage, and there are also several items from the series that could work well for moves too. All in all, there's some potential for a pretty fun character here, so I'll go with a 7 out of 10. Moving on to personal ones, and I'm sorry to the Chibi Robo fanbase, but as someone who hasn't played any games in the series, I don't have the same attachment to the character as many others do, so I'm going with a 5 out of 10 here. It's definitely not to the point where I'd be completely disappointed with an inclusion of him in the game or anything of the sort. After all, it might have a big impact on the future legacy of the franchise and allow it to be revived, which would be great. But there are many other characters that are not only more deserving out there, but I'd also much prefer to see join the battle. And finally, for the likelihood, and I'll go with a 2 out of 10 here. About the same as Viridi, because I highly doubt that Nintendo would believe that a lot of people out there would want to pay for Chibi Robo to be included in Smash, as opposed to almost anyone else that they could pick. But you never know. The next character that I want to talk about today is Shantae. Being the protagonist of the surprise Shantae series created by indie developer WayForward back in 2002, this character has appeared on Nintendo consoles for a long time now, and has a pretty decent following amongst fans to the point where there were some vocal people requesting for her appearance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And while Shovel Knight was able to get the assist trophy role, Shantae still made it in as a spirit, which alone is a tremendous accomplishment for a series that's not known very well in Japan. So should she be upgraded to the status of playable character? Well, let's see. Many fans, when requesting for Shantae, point out one of the big supporting factors is a great potential moveset, and I can't really blame them for that. Obviously, Shantae's hair would likely be a main standard attack, but her moveset could be made much more interesting by utilizing her various animal transformations that can make her a lot different from most others in the cast of characters. Because of this, I'd rate her at least an 8 out of 10 in the unique moveset department. Moving on to personal ones, and while I can't say that I'd like to see her as much as some other characters on this list, her inclusion would not only provide this very fun and unique moveset, and shatter the glass ceiling for other indie characters like Shovel Knight, for example, to join the battle, it would be a great thing. 7 out of 10 here. The problem then comes with the likelihood of her being in Fighters Pass 2. Just from the vibe and the attitude that we're getting from the developers being very excited about her spirit's implementation into Smash, it doesn't seem like the plan was ever to add her as DLC. I'll go with a 2 out of 10 here because there may be a slight chance, but I highly doubt it. And the next spirit, or should I say duality of spirits that I'll be breaking down here, is Rex and Pyro. While this is technically 2 spirits, I believe they'd most likely be combined into one fighter for a playable role because of how they've been shown to work in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I've talked about these guys a lot in previous videos, so I'm not going to dwell too much on them here. Let's just discuss the moveset. I believe there could be a very interesting set developed here, especially since you have the option to include the abilities of 2 characters in one. Potentially Pyro could transform into Mithra for some added attacks. Definitely at least an 8 out of 10 in this department. Now for the personal one, and another Xenoblade character is something I've always been a big supporter of. A character like Alma from X I'd love to see as well, but Rex and Pyro I'd appreciate just the same. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the sympathy that I tend to have for rejected characters as well, so yeah, 8 out of 10 once again. Now for the likelihood department, and for that I'm going to go with a 9 out of 10. I've explained previously that reps from Xenoblade 2 and ARMS were both considered prior to the release of Ultimate, and now that Min Min got in, I'm almost positive that it's going to translate to a Xenoblade 2 character getting in as well. I'm sure there would also be a lot of people interested in buying this duality of characters both in Japan and internationally, which is also an important factor. And one last character that I want to talk about today is Raymond. This guy's been requested a lot over the years, especially for Smash 4 when fans went crazy when a convincing leak spread of him being in the roster. So should he be included? Well, I'm sure you know how it works by this point, so let's discuss the moveset. In his storied series of games, he's been shown to use a lot of fun looking attacks, items, and abilities that could be seamlessly carried over into Smash Bros. There's a reason why so many people want him, and his disembodied limbs could allow for additional reach. Well, maybe not that much reach, but enough to make it interesting. I'd give him an 8 out of 10 for the potential. In terms of personal want, that's up there as well, being a 7 out of 10. A character like Raymond, who isn't very popular in Japan, getting in, again like Shantae, would open that door even further to non-Nintendo characters in that vein. While characters like Banjo who fit that criteria obviously exist, it would still help things along, considering that I don't believe it's too bold of a take to admit that Raymond cannot nearly boast the amount of historical importance to gaming that Banjo and Kazooie have. Moving on to the likelihood, and the thing with a Raymond inclusion is that the relationship between Nintendo and Ubisoft seems to be pretty good right now, with more and more of their games coming to Switch, and their continued collaborations on games such as Mario & Rabbids or Starlink Battle for Atlas. There could definitely be something brewing there, and who knows if Raymond will actually be the character who ends up getting selected if there was to be a Ubisoft rep, but there is a shot, and I'd rate him about a 4 out of 10 here. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'm sure you'll enjoy some of my others, so consider subscribing and turning all notifications on to ensure you don't miss new Smash content. And hey, if you really like this video, let me know some more characters that you'd like to be added, such as assist trophies this time around, and if there's enough of you who want to see it, we'll make it happen. With all that being said, I'll see you next time.